What's up guys, it's Mykyl, and today I'm going to be breaking down the production behind my song Smoke Signals. First things first, pretty much throughout the entire song I have this guitar riff going that's really glitchy and kind of bouncy and bubbly sounding. Basically I just played a pretty simple riff on acoustic guitar and then I imported the guitar into Melodyne. Okay, if we go to algorithm in Melodyne and then we say polyphonic sustain, it's going to show us all the different notes that I played on guitar. And so what I did is after I played this basic riff, I chopped out the notes and I kind of dragged them around. Obviously this isn't going to sound exactly like the song, but I'm just kind of demonstrating what I did here. So if I play this back after moving these notes around, and pretty much the first few hours of me working on the song was just chopping around the notes and messing with this acoustic guitar until I got it feeling really cool. I'm huge on ear candies, and so sometimes I like to just have very minimal layers but then add a lot of kind of glitchy effects in the background. If you notice in verse 1, it's pretty much just that one guitar layer, vocals, and then some weird kind of like ear candy-y things. If I solo those, you'll be able to hear all of the different weird noises that I used. If it was just the guitar and vocals, I'd probably get bored, but now there's just a little bit of interest here and there sprinkled throughout. I'm a big fan of the Max Martin rule where every 4 or 8 bars you introduce a new layer to just keep the momentum building. So for this second half of verse 1, I added these guitar harmonics. So those are just harmonics I played on an acoustic guitar, and then I ran them through Phase Mistress. What I always do is I'll just browse presets until I find something that I like, I'll tweak it a little bit, and then leave it as is. Now we're getting into the meat of the song, and in this pre-chorus I added a ton of layers, really trying to make it feel full. I still have the main guitar riff going, and then I also added an octave lower. And then my friend Todd Tran sent me a guitar pack of riffs that are absolutely killer. So I took some of those, I chopped them up, and pitched them into the key of my song. And so I pitched them up really high so it would have kind of that like fairy, sparkly sound. Okay, and then this is the element that really makes it feel gargantuan. I created an orchestra of guitars. So if I dive into this folder, it looks like there's about 16 different guitars that I recorded, where I played different inversions of each chord. So if I solo some of these. And all together, it just makes this monolithic sound. On top of that, we have these weird wah, like synthy sounds. The bass is probably the simplest part of this whole section. I just found a respace on Trillion that I liked that just has a really smooth undertone. The drums here are literally just a hyperpop loop that I found. I sped it up so it would feel really quick. I automated a filter on it so that all the highs are cut out at the beginning and then it slowly brings them in towards the end to kind of give it this energy building. Probably the most noticeable thing on here is this Valhalla Space Modulator, which is a free plugin and it just adds kind of a flanging effect. So for this chorus, I wanted to strip it back to something really simple and then build it up into a huge post-chorus like how a lot of EDM songs build. And so I just played flanged chords on the guitar, brum, 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 brum. And then in order to give it that warpy feel, I pitch shifted it down an octave, and then I bounced that in place, and then up an octave, bounced that in place, and did that over and over. And over time, the audio quality starts to degrade, and it gets these interesting artifacts in it. You can tell that it's a guitar, but there's just something off about it, and it's because of all the pitch shifting that I did. For the second half, I bring back in that guitar orchestra that we had in the pre-chorus, alongside some kind of EDM building drums. And the kick is just hitting with every guitar strum. I bring back in that break beat from before. At the end of this build, I made a little fill with my drums, and then I filtered them and I put a flanger on it. And I made it completely mono. Something that makes the post-chorus feel huge is that I'm automating the stereo image of the entire music bus. And so over time, it slowly just plays out of a single speaker in the middle. And then once the post-chorus comes in, I bring in all that stereo information back. And it just makes it feel so huge. Okay, let's break down this post-chorus here. Let's start with the drums. Here I have this fat kick sample that I found on Splice. Snare. And then here's a layer that I added to the snare to just give it more energy. That same breakbeat that we had before. For the bass, I just found a plucky bass, and I'm literally only playing quarter notes. Next up, I added guitar chugs. Those chopped strums from the chorus. Guitar orchestra. And then on top of it all, I played this little guitar solo that's literally just the melody of the chorus. In order to add some more interest, I ran that same guitar solo through a vocoder, and so I sang the words of the chorus, and then I layered it in with the guitar, and it gives it kind of an interesting modulation effect. So if you know what to listen for, when you hear the drop, you can actually hear the words in the guitar solo. Okay, at the end of the drop, there's kind of a crazy transition effect. What I did here was I put a plugin on my music bus, so everything is routed to this one track that I called All Instruments, and then I have this instance of the plugin Infiltrator, and I just browsed presets until I found something that sounded crazy, and I'm just automating it from 0% to 100% right before the end of the drop. You know what time it is. I always put Jaycee in all my songs, and so right here at the end of the post-chorus, I thought it'd be fun to introduce her using a vocoder. So I had her sing, and then I ran her through a vocoder, and it ended up sounding like this. And that leads us right into verse 2. The drums in verse 2 are super simple. It's literally just a kick, a snare, and then a hi-hat loop that I found. But what gives it its interesting character is that the hi-hats, I threw on Valhalla Space Modulator on this. And it adds this really interesting down flanging effect. And so even though it's really simple, it still feels really fun and interesting. For the bass, I'm taking those plucky chords, but then I'm just only doing 2 hits instead of consistent quarter notes. But the really fun stuff is happening in the guitar layers. So we still have our main riff from before. But then we have some chugs. I added some plucky guitars. And then we have kind of a washed out ringy guitar here. The second half just adds those harmonics that were in the first verse as well. This time around, I figured it'd be nice to skip the pre-chorus and just go right into the chorus and get that hook. The only difference in chorus 2 is I added a new breakbeat to it to keep the momentum going. So this is an old vintage drum loop that's been chopped up, and then I made every hit extremely short, and so it feels kind of like... The bridge strips everything back into just the guitar orchestra, and then there's also these weird wahs. We bring back in those Todd arps. And so we have just a very slidey bass. So after this bridge, in order to make this final chorus really feel huge, I decided I would just cut everything for 2 beats right before it drops. And so here on my all instrument bus, you can see that I've automated the volume all the way down to 0. And then I do have one cymbal slide that isn't routed through there. And so that's literally all you can hear, just building up energy into that final drop. And this drop is just all of those layers that we had from the post-chorus and then throwing my vocals on top of them. This outro is pretty simple. I'm just using those same ARPs that Todd sent me. But one of my favorite pieces of subtle production in here is I used a Morse code machine to type out SOS, and it created these beeps. Since the pre-chorus talks about sending out an SOS from the sinking in my soul, I thought it would be cool to add that Morse code right at the end during the outro. This isn't the only time that I used Morse code in the album. At the beginning of Glad We Didn't Meet, I typed out Jaycee's name in Morse code, and you can hear it kind of fading into the intro of that song. Alright guys, that was my production breakdown for Smoke Signals. I hope you enjoyed watching, and this was probably one of my favorite productions on the entire Exposition album. I just think it came together super well. Let me know if there's any more production breakdowns you want to see in the future, and I'll catch you next time.